President, I was talking with a journalist about an hour ago in Baghdad who says to be a cynic in Iraq is to be naive at this point. That there is discernible progress, undeniable progress on the battlefield, but there is just as discernible and undeniable lack of progress on political reconciliation. Given the premise of the surge is to give the Iraqi government breathing space to get its business done, given that they're not getting their business done, are the American people entitled to hear from you more than I've told Prime Minister Maliki he's got to do better?
As you know, that General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker will be coming back to report on the findings of the success of the surge. The surge success will not only include military successes and military failures, but also political successes and political failures. And my own perspective is that they have made some progress, but not enough. I fully recognize this is a difficult assignment. One of the things that is difficult because of years of tyrannical rule that have created a lot of suspicions, and there's a lot of folks need to trust each other more. Secondly, from my perspective, we're watching leaders learn how to be leaders. It's a new process for people to be democratic leaders. Now, no question they haven't passed some of the law we expected them to pass up to now. That's where a lot of people will focus their attention. On the other hand, there is a presidency council with people from different political parties trying to work through some of these difficult issues, trying to work through the distrust that has caused them not to be able to pass some of the law we expect. In the July 15th report that I submitted to Congress, there were indications that they had met about half the benchmarks, and some of the political benchmarks they were falling short. One of the things I found interesting is that the Assembly, their elected Parliament, has passed about 60 pieces of legislation this year, some of which are directly relevant to reconciliations, like judicial reform, some of which were unwinding Saddam's laws in the past. One of the questions I recently asked about, is there a functioning government? Is there a, look, from a lot of Americans look at it and say there's nothing happening there. There's like no government at all, I expect they're saying. So I asked about the budgeting process. In other words, is there a centralized budgeting system that takes the oil revenues? So I understand about 97% of the Iraqi revenues to date come from oil. And do they have a rational way of spending that money for the good of society? Now, most of the money, it turns out, is going into their military operations, operating expenses and capital expenses. But one of the things I found interesting in my questions was there is revenue sharing. There was a central government revenue sharing to provincial governments. It surprised me, frankly, because the impression you get from people who are reporting out of Iraq is that it's like totally dysfunctional. That's what I guess your friend or whoever you talk to is implying. In 2006, the central government allocated $2.3 billion to the provinces. I'm not exactly sure how the funding formula worked, but quick analysis, there's no question that Shia and Sunni provinces and Kurdish provinces were receiving, money. Of the 2.3 billion, 1.9 had been obligated or spent. Now, some of that money is being better spent now because of bottom-up reconciliation that's taken place in places like Anbar, particularly with the help of our provincial reconstruction teams. The PRTs are helping. That's not to say, my point to you there is that there needs still to be work in making sure that the provincial governments are functioning well to earn the trust of the people. It's not just the central government that we're working with. We're also working with provincial governments to make sure that people are inspired to believe that the state is in their interest. The point I'm making to you on this, Jim, is that there's a lot of work left to be done. Don't get me wrong. If one were to look hard, they could find indications that, more than indications, facts that show the government is learning how to function. People say we need an oil revenue sharing law. I agree with that. It needs to be codified. However, there's oil revenue sharing taking place, is my point. There's a lot of work to be done, and the fundamental question facing America is it worth it? Does it matter whether or not we stay long enough for an ally in this war against radicals and extremists to emerge? And my answer is it does matter. Long-term consequences will face our country if we leave before the job is done. How the troops are configured, what the deployment looks like, will depend upon the recommendations of David Petraeus.